Hey, good morning, everyone. Uh, Today, I am delighted to report that because I'm at church, I'm able to upgrade our internet connection. So that's awesome. No delay in getting started. I'm gonna, as you on board, I'm gonna just let you chill for a minute and be attentive to the courtyard that's behind me today as a way to think about how we as a community can live into the theme for today, which is simply to be to be open. So that'll be the theme for today. As you start to join on board, make sure you shout out to each other. It's so great to have folks kind of gathering together. I'm delighted that you're joining us this morning on this Memorial Day weekend. Hopefully, you're enjoying the thought of having a barbecue tonight or whatever you're up to this evening. I know that Lori and I are planning on doing some hamburgers on the grill, so that's always an exciting way to kick off Memorial Day holiday. Um, Glad to see too some folks who've struggled to jump onto this live stream signing on, so that's great. I know sometimes it's kind of tricky to get on board, so great to see you coming on board as well. Last night, Lori and I went to the theater, and in a strange way, the theater, as you can imagine, is struggling just like churches are struggling to figure out how they're going to offer the gifts that they bring to our common life to the public. And so last night, Shotgun Players, the organization that we hold season tickets at, decided to do a Zoom play. And I found it fascinating that they are really trying to lean into how to communicate in this time. And each of the actors stood alone in front of their laptop, isolated, and yet all together performing this play. Each one of them staring into that little camera on their computer to provide this sense that they were present for each other and for the playwright as the play came together. And as I watched that last night, I thought, that's very much what we're doing together as well. And while our president has asked that all churches opened up this morning, I thought, well, why not? Let's open the doors and keep our president happy. So delighted to bring you all on board for this today. Just a couple of more thoughts before I get rolling today. Just a reminder that today I'm not going to have this time where you're able to shout out to each other. So this is a good time when we're getting started to just send some emoticons up and just be grateful for an opportunity to gather together to enjoy the great outdoors behind me, the patio, the baptismal font, the bell in the background, the tree as it grows, the traffic along the street, all of it, because we're going to be open today. All right. I'm glad you're here. If you do have a minute today, one of the rituals that I'm going to invite you to explore and to take with you into the week is the use of a stone. And I'm going to describe that at the end. But if you have a rock or something sitting around or something heavy or something that you can hold for a moment today, I'm going to use that as a way to kind of feel our way into this current experience. So if you have a stone, and as you well know, here at church, I'm addicted to stones. So we do stones for our labyrinth and all that. Make sure you grab one today, or you can use it later if you'd like as well. So let me get started. Since we've got about 40 of us here online, I want to just get started with sort of a centering exercise, and that is, I've been thinking a lot this week in particular, and what I'm going to share as well is, and struggling a little bit, kind of with this kind of feelings of almost depression again coming on, this sort of holding back feelings of being depressed. And I've been struggling to figure out why is that happening to me now, especially since there is a movement in our country and in other countries as well to open back up again, to invite us back into the experience of life that we probably all miss and long for again. And yet, I'm still not sure I'm internally ready to open back up again. And what is that all about? And I imagine you too are experiencing, all sorts of a range of emotions around the idea of being open again, the idea of reconnecting with people again, and both the joy and the risk that can provide. I know congregations as well are starting to struggle with the idea of what would it look like for people to come back together again. How would that feel? So I think there's just a lot of added anxiety when we think of the possibility of opening our lives back up again. So today, as a centering piece, I would invite you to, whether you hold a stone or just to cup your hands and kind of hold your own life for a moment, I just want to invite you into a space of silence to just be in touch with what feelings are coming up for you. Where do you find your kind of internal landscape at this precipitous moment when a world still under the weight of a pandemic is also at the same time exploring ways to open back up again, and what that feels like for you. So I'm going to do that myself, maybe say a few words as we do. Maybe like Carla just shouted out, maybe rather than keeping it inside whatever's going on for you, you could type in the comment line sort of what feelings are brewing for you, so that other people kind of get a sense of that and can share that with you and be shaped by that as well in the week ahead. So just take a moment, take a couple of deep breaths, and draw inside just long enough to feel where you are at as we begin this journey together this morning. And I'm carrying a big stone because I can feel the weight of this thing in my soul. So I'm going to do that today. All right. So take a deep breath and just try to get in touch with where you're at. And let's just breathe together silently as a community for a couple of minutes and just notice and honor and listen to the world within that ultimately will help you navigate your journey back into our common life together. And one more kind of deep cleansing breath as we get ready to reflect on some thoughts for today. All right, welcome. So I don't want to take responsibility for the president's call for churches to open up, but I've been thinking all week about what it might mean to be open again. And as I thought about that and started to process what that might feel like for me and for you and for neighbor and world, I was reminded of an old story in the Christian tradition of it's in, where is it? If you want to look it up, it's Mark chapter 7. Mark chapter 7, if you want to go look this story up. But it's a story about Jesus who's journeying through various towns and regions. And in each of those towns and regions, he is engaging people in a particular way, inviting them into the kind of experience of life that I think is brewing for him, that he's trying to help people both almost like get a taste of based on his teachings and his parables, and also to begin to enter into. In this particular story, Jesus is actually not in familiar territory. He's in what's called the Decapolis. It's a collection of 10 different Greco-Roman cities. So these are not the kind of people that he would normally have hung out with as he was growing up. These are not people who have the Judaism as their primary religion. They're more secular people, what we might think of as sort of pagan communities. They have different religious rituals. Jesus is journeying into the landscape of people outside of his own religious system. And there, in that context, with people who we might think of, and I think of as sort of secular people who are crafting meaning out from the cultural context in which they find themselves, secularites, let's think of them as, Jesus runs into a person who I believe from birth is both cannot hear and cannot speak, does not have the capacity to hear and does not have the capacity to speak. It's both deaf and dumb. Now, at first you might think that that's just an ailment, but those of us who realize that Jesus is operating in a culture that is an oral culture, an oral tradition, the capacity to be able to listen, the capacity to be able to speak, is the capacity to be able to participate in the culture itself. And so all of a sudden he runs into a person, and I think this person is a paradigm. He runs into a person who cannot engage in this gift of life. He or she is isolated, is shut down from the having capacity to be engaged, and has had to be shut down for their entire life. In some ways, it's very familiar territory, because all of us for the last, how many weeks it's been, have had that same sort of experience of having to kind of isolate and pull back. We've lost our ability to connect with the fabric, the vibrancy of our common life, right? We've all had to draw inside into our small little family systems, into our homes, our apartments, wherever we happen to reside, right? We're all deaf and dumb now. And we have been that way for a while. Struggling with the capacity of how to listen, how to speak within a context that we've sort of lost that capacity to do so. You see, I'm not alone here. So, in that context, Jesus enters into a relationship with this person and speaks two words. I believe he speaks the words in Greek, not in his own native tongue. And the words that he says to the one who is isolated, who doesn't have the ability to engage in the culture, is simply this: be open. Be open. What a call that is. It is what we all long for, isn't it? To be open. To be able to hear and participate and to see and to absorb all of life. To allow it to sink deep into who we are, and then with our voice to give expression to it, to be open. To be open is an invitation into life itself, with all of its risk, all of its possibility, all of its hope, all of its longings, the expectations, the hurt, the pain, the joy, the bliss, the capacity for sensation and joy. It's all there. And Jesus invites those who are isolated into this sort of existential claim, simply to be open. When I think about that possibility, hey, Andrew, so I'm not alone here today. When I think about that possibility, and I match it with the kind of feelings of depression that I've been going through, right? This sense of I feel like there's this thin veil, and behind that veil is a wave of depression that's just weighing on me, right? Why is that? Why am I experiencing that? And I think it's partly because of this. It's partly because I'm realizing that in this time that we've been required to distance from each other, to be isolated, that I'm, in a sense, reminded that the world that we knew prior to COVID-19 was a deeply isolated one itself. As I have drawn into more isolation, I'm realizing more and more that the way in which I used to live my life, thinking I was connected to community, was also deeply isolated. My place of privilege as a white male living in the suburbs, I completely feel isolated, separate from so many people around the planet. I have lived my life that way. I haven't had a sense of being open to alternative experiences of others. The same is true about my relationship to the planet, right? I have not lived being open to the way in which my life is so integrated into the very fabric of the universe itself. I act as if I stand alone. My sense of individualism and self-capacity, it's all extremely isolating to the point in which I feel like I haven't been open at all. I haven't been heeding this call or this challenge that we hear in the life of Jesus long ago to truly be open, to be open to one another, to be open to the fabric of life that holds us, to be open to those who struggle around the globe who are in different economic situations or cultural situations. Rather, we have this tendency to self-isolate into religious groups, economic groups, political groups. We're separated off from each other. And so when the challenge of opening back up again becomes a possibility, I guess the question I want to ask is, well, what does that mean? What could that mean for me, for you, for the planet, to truly heed this call to those who cannot or have not been able to hear, who have not been able to speak, to truly be open? That's the challenge I want to set for us today. And what, at least I'm going to reflect on for the week. And of course, in some ways, this is all about what's going on in my head and my soul. And I hope it kind of resonates with some of you, right? So that's what's going on, is how do we prepare ourselves for a greater openness? Not just, functional openness, but existential openness. There's a great Zen koan that I ran into this week as I was getting ready to share with you. And I'm going to tell you the koan. The koan is a Zen story, very like a Christian parable. A koan is a story that holds all this hidden meaning or meaning. And once you hear the story, like one of Jesus' parables, it is intended to awaken you. And I think this particular Zen koan has capacity to kind of invite us into the possibility of being open in a new way, to being open to this collective experience that we're having as a planet that allows us this capacity to hear, see, feel engaged in a deeper way. So here's the story. One day, a young Buddhist is on a journey, right? So a young Buddhist is on a journey, and he comes to the banks of this wide, slow-moving river. And he stares hopelessly at this obstacle of a river that sits now in front of him, and he ponders for hours, how am I going to cross such a wide barrier? And just as he's about to kind of give up on his pursuit and just continue on his way, he sees across the river a great teacher on the other side. And the young Buddhist yells as loud as he can across the river, "Oh, wise one, can you tell me how to get to the other side of the river? Oh, wise one, tell me, how do I get to the other side of this river?" The teacher ponders the request of the young Buddhist. He looks up the great river, and he looks down the great river, and he yells back, "My child, you are on the other side." Isn't that a great one? Child, you are on the other side. How do we awaken that what we might be seeking on the other side of the river isn't what we should be seeking at all? In fact, we are on the other side of the river. Can we awaken to that as we're asked to be open again? That to me is the great, great question. So this week, as you're kind of reflecting on this theme, what I'm going to invite you to do is to think about or connect again to that which helps you feel like you're able to open up wider. It could be a piece of poetry. It could be a piece of art that you have around the house. It could be a Bible reading that you like, the 23rd Psalm or something out of the text. It could be a good book. Whatever it happens to be, what I would invite you to do, and I've done it here, is to open that piece up. And if you have a stone that kind of reminds you of kind of the gravity of this time that we're in, to place the stone and the open piece kind of by your front door or wherever you enter out into the world, so that you're reminded this week of the call that is in this Christian story, the call that is in this Buddhist story to be open. Today, I've selected for my journey a reading from one of my favorite writers. His name is Don Cupid, and this book is called Emptiness and Brightness, although it might be reversed so you can't read it on your side. And Don Cupid is convinced, he's a philosopher of religion, and he's convinced that that the idea of God that we used to use as a way to orient ourselves to seek meaning in the world, like I'm God's child, or I'm a child of God, or God loves the world, whatever that is, has been replaced in our time with this idea of life. That life is, in a sense, become the new word for God. And we don't use God, we're too comfortable with that in our normal language, but we do use the word life. We have replaced the conversations that we used to have, thinking in terms of God, with the idea of life itself. And his ideas really opened up a lot of new frontier for me, invited me to realize that maybe what I seek is not across the river, but it's right here. So to close our time together today, I'm going to read just a little clip from him today to you. He says, "Our teaching then is that life is all there is. Life has no outside, no other side of the river, right? Life has no capacity for that. This just is. This is. And we have to make somehow religious happiness out of it. In fact, true religion is the practice of making eternal happiness out of the ordinariness of life itself. Religious happiness, eternal happiness, out of the experience of life itself. How we attend to that life, how we cast ourselves into it, how we identify ourselves with it, and how we relate ourselves to others within that great gift. True religion is saying yes to life. Isn't that a great reading? It's a great book. I read it when Lori and I were on vacation once up in the northern coast and absolutely blew my mind. I'm going to keep this open book as a reminder to myself to be open. And I would invite you to find that thing that triggers for you this capacity to be open as we are invited to re-engage the world in a new way. Let's do it with an open heart, open hands, open souls, and open minds, shall we? That is the journey of creating some sort of eternal joy in the midst of it all. All right? Amen to that. Let me close today, before I go to announcement time, with just a reminder of that Zen Buddhist poem. The Buddhist monk stuck on the river cries out to the master, "How do I get to the other side?" And the master cries back, "You are on the other side. Be there and be open." Amen. All right, gang, I wanted to keep it a little short today because it's Memorial Day weekend, so I'm hoping that you have a wonderful time out in nature or whatever you're going to do today to somehow take a deep breath and spend some time reflecting on that call of Jesus to the man to be open, and think about what's going on for you as you get ready to engage the world in a meaningful way. A couple of announcements today. Number one, I want to invite you, of course, to just scroll down and hear Martin Worley play his piece of music in honor of Memorial Day, as we honor all those that we have lost to war. And in some ways, I feel anyway, we're all being conscripted into this battle against this virus that so many have lost their lives to as well. So a nice way to kind of pause and honor those who have suffered during this time. Also, just a reminder that we have a post-COVID-19 task force that's beginning to look at ways in which we can be community again together on Sunday morning. But we're also hearing from a lot of people that this feature of having some sort of online version of a time to reflect has been helpful for them. So we'll also run that in parallel and see where that goes down the road as well. I want to shout out, of course, one more thing. You could scroll down even further, and I put a link to Randy Berardi again. He's a PhD in philosophy of religion. And he was doing a class here on the birth narratives. And the introduction to that class was pretty amazing in the ways in which it allowed for biblical stories to function as existential guides. And Randy, who moved from being a fundamentalist Christian to now what he calls an existentialist Christian, kind of helps walk you through that in the first, 10 minutes of that. It's really very impressive. It's kind of a bad filming, but his content is just super. So if you have time today, take a look at that. I also wanted to shout out to folks to really a deep gratitude for people who have donated to us, whether they're members or not of this congregation, who have sent in cards and donations and just some gratitude for being able to chill out on a Sunday morning for 30 minutes. So thank you for taking the time to sit down and writing the church a check to help offset our costs to make this happen. So our gratitude for that. And then finally, in this week, we put out the annual report. That's the only way you're going to get it. If you want a hard copy of it, you need to reach out to the church office and we'll mail you a hard copy of it. I would encourage you to read through that because our annual meeting this year is obviously going to be done digitally. Even our voting will be through a distance, and we're working on a voting mechanism now to vote for approval of both the budget and all of the nominees that we're seeking to help guide us into next year. And a lot of prayer for the people who are going to be guiding us, because this is going to be a crazy year to be in ministry together. That said, uh, I don't have any sense that spirit or sacred or holiness or joy or capacity reflection has been truncated by our inability to be physically present with each other. Um, we're all focused. We're all focused and working on building both capacity and capacity to engage world in a meaningful way. That has not stopped, and makes my heart sing that it hasn't stopped. So, despite Trump's encouragement to open up the doors of the physical space, the doors of our hearts and our souls have been open throughout this journey, and I think it's going to have lasting effect. Huh? Hope you do too. All right, that's it for this Sunday. It's getting warm outside. Enjoy the outside. It's been awesome to see people walking around back there. I don't know what they're thinking as they do. The only thing they're thinking is, man, that guy's shirt is just awesome. And probably happy to see that we're trying to make connections together. Blessings to you this Memorial Day weekend. And of course, be open.